Imagine standing at a crossroads in your inner world, torn between two contradictory forces, an undercurrent of feelings you can't quite name, and a more familiar sense of who you believe you should be. Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." It's a potent statement that invites us to look deeper into the parts of ourselves we often ignore. So many of us feel that we're wrestling with hidden motives, battling impulses that come out of nowhere, or sabotaging our own happiness without understanding why. Could it be that part of this struggle involves the hidden presence of your anima for men or animus for women? These terms can sound mysterious and remote, but Jung used them to describe deep, unconscious aspects of our psyche, inner personalities, if you will, that contain qualities we've disowned or underestimated. They can act like invisible puppeteers behind our moods, our attractions, and our unspoken fears. Before we dive into the heart of the matter, let's take a moment for a quick reminder. If you enjoy exploring these deeper dimensions of the human mind, please subscribe. We talk about psychological insights in a way that's relatable and applicable to real life, aiming to help you navigate everything from romantic entanglements to creative breakthroughs. And today we're drilling down into one of Jung's most captivating ideas, the anima, animus, and the tug-of-war it can create in your soul. We'll uncover why we sometimes feel contradictory yearnings, like craving independence, yet longing for emotional closeness, or projecting unrealistic fantasies onto our partners, and then feeling disillusioned. We'll analyze how this concept might shed new light on old struggles, like repetitive relationship patterns, or that sense of internal conflict that won't seem to go away. Many people think the solution to these inner dilemmas is simply more self-control or superficial confidence-building exercises. But real psychological growth often comes from recognizing our hidden sides, the ones we never openly acknowledge. Jung believed that men have an inner feminine element, the anima, and women have an inner masculine element, the animus, each containing traits that we typically attribute to the opposite gender. This isn't about stereotypes. It's about reclaiming qualities that culture or upbringing might have taught us to deny. If you're a man who's been trained to appear tough at all costs, your anima may express itself through unexpected emotional surges. If you're a woman who's felt pressured to be agreeable and accommodating, your animus might surface in outbursts of anger or a craving for uncompromising independence. Today we'll explore how these patterns get locked in place, what real-world examples look like, and how you can start reconciling these tensions for a more balanced, fulfilling life. Let's delve in. When Jung discussed the anima and animus, he described them as doors to your soul's hidden chambers, each containing suppressed wishes, values, and inclinations you've somehow lost along the way. To make sense of why we repress these aspects, consider the idea of the persona, another Jungian concept that refers to the social mask we wear to gain approval. You have a persona for your job, maybe one for your family gatherings, and perhaps a different one when you're out with friends. This persona isn't necessarily a lie, but it's incomplete. Overemphasizing the persona can create tension by bearing important facets of who you are. Enter the shadow, the repository of traits we consider unacceptable. Here's where anima or animus can sometimes get shoved if they don't align with the version of ourselves we're told to be. Take the example of a 35-year-old father, Mark. He learned as a teenager that boys don't cry, so he prided himself on his unshakable composure. Yet recently, when his daughter expressed her sadness about school, he found himself overwhelmed by inexplicable emotion. He snapped at her to toughen up, later feeling guilty and conflicted. This outburst wasn't a random moment of poor parenting. It was an eruption of the anima qualities he'd been suppressing: empathy, tenderness, and vulnerability. The more he tried to pretend those traits didn't exist in him, the more forcefully they demanded attention. It's like trying to force a beach ball underwater. It eventually bursts to the surface more powerfully than before. Similarly, consider a 29-year-old woman named Sarah who prides herself on being endlessly accommodating. She's the friend who says yes to everything, the co-worker who never questions the boss, the partner who rarely voices her needs. Underneath the surface, her animus is a trove of assertiveness, boundary setting, and critical thinking. But because these traits conflict with her deeply ingrained notion that nice girls don't make waves, she rarely channels them. Then out of the blue, she'll erupt in frustration or walk away from friendships feeling used, puzzled why she can't balance kindness with self-respect. In Jung's view, Sarah's animus is signaling her that she has a right to stand firm, speak her truth, and even disagree without losing love or respect. What we learn from these examples is how crucial it is to identify the forces operating beneath the persona. We're not one-dimensional. Each of us contains a full range of human qualities: logical and emotional, strong and gentle, assertive and receptive. When we exclude any part of that spectrum, we create tension. Recognizing your anima or animus is a powerful step because it reveals where your rigidity has cut you off from qualities that could enrich your life. Self-knowledge of this kind doesn't weaken you, it frees you. Now let's dig deeper into how these unconscious factors affect our relationships. Whether it's romantic, familial, or professional dynamics, unconscious anima-animus qualities can significantly shape the roles we play and the people we attract. A classic Jungian idea is that men often project their anima onto romantic partners, idealizing them as the embodiment of all the warmth or emotional sensitivity they don't permit themselves to express. Meanwhile, women can project their animus onto men, seeing them as heroes or villains who carry the ambition or intellectual rigor they haven't claimed for themselves. These projections can lead to either intense admiration or inexplicable conflict. Imagine a scenario where James, a 42-year-old architect, finds himself irresistibly drawn to women who seem emotionally volatile. At first, he finds their emotional range exciting. He feels drawn in, like he's finally able to experience the emotional intensity he's repressed. But as time goes on, these relationships become chaotic, and he blames his partners for being too emotional. The reality is that James is in love and in conflict with his own suppressed emotional life. His partner's emotional expressiveness both fascinates and terrifies him because it highlights the part of himself he's never learned to handle. On the flip side, Danielle, a successful attorney, might be repeatedly drawn to men who are exceedingly dominant or opinionated. She may admire their decisiveness at first, wishing she could be that bold, but over time she resents feeling overshadowed. In a Jungian sense, she's encountering her animus qualities, her own capacity for confidence, assertiveness, and leadership that she hasn't fully owned. The men she chooses reflect traits she needs to integrate, but the friction arises because she projects those qualities instead of realizing she has them within her. Recognizing these patterns can be a major aha moment. When James realizes he's resisting his own capacity for emotional expression, or Danielle sees she's uncomfortable with her own capacity for strength, the tension starts to make sense. It's not merely about picking the wrong partner every time. It's about externalizing parts of ourselves that we need to invite back in. This realization can be painful at first. Who wants to admit that the friction we face might be self-generated? But it's also liberating. If the problem is partly within, then the solution is also within, and we don't have to keep repeating the same destructive cycles. If you're finding this exploration of Jung's ideas helpful, give this video a like or share it with someone who might relate. It's amazing how understanding these inner dynamics can clarify so many relationship puzzles. We often blame the other person or random life circumstances for our unhappiness, but sometimes the real culprit is our refusal to integrate crucial parts of ourselves. To analyze this further, let's step into how the anima or animus might influence our day-to-day behaviors in subtle ways. Have you ever found yourself inexplicably attracted to a piece of art, a style of music, or a movie genre that you usually avoid? Sometimes your unconscious is beckoning you toward qualities or emotional states that your conscious identity ignores. The same goes for dreams. People often report dreams where they encounter mysterious figures of the opposite sex, sometimes as guides, lovers, or even adversaries. Jung interpreted these dream figures as representations of the anima animus. They appear to highlight the parts of ourselves we're not acknowledging while awake. For example, a busy executive named Rachel might keep dreaming about a calm, wise male figure who suggests she slow down and reflect. In waking life, she pushes herself relentlessly, believing her success depends on never stopping. Yet she's amazed how comforting and reassuring this dream figure is. In Jungian terms, that figure could be her animus, guiding her toward more confidence in her inner wisdom and less reliance on external achievements for self-worth. Another important angle is how the anima animus interacts with creativity. For men who feel blocked creatively, tapping into the anima can release imagination, empathy, and fluidity. For women who sense a barrier to bringing their ideas to life, the animus can spark decisive action and strategic planning. It's not that one is purely emotional and the other purely logical. Those are oversimplifications. Rather, your anima or animus can offer a broader emotional palette and perspective, opening doors that your usual sense of self keeps locked. A writer named Thomas once realized that whenever he felt stuck, it was because he was editing his thoughts too harshly, ignoring the softer, more intuitive impressions he had. Letting himself daydream and flow, qualities often stereotyped as feminine, unlocked his creativity. Similarly, a painter named Monica discovered that embracing her bold, assertive vision, characteristics often stereotyped as masculine, made her artwork stand out with a newfound strength and clarity. Here's a simple metaphor for the anima and animus. Think of them as missing colors on your personal artist's palette. If you only paint with a narrow set of tones, your life portrait might look flat or incomplete. Integrating these missing colors, whether they're aspects of compassion, assertiveness, receptivity, or control, can give you a richer, more vibrant picture of your life. This doesn't mean adopting traits that feel unnatural. It means acknowledging the ones that are already inside you, waiting to be expressed in healthy, balanced ways. Moving forward, the question arises: how do we actually work with these inner figures? Jung believed that we can't merely think our way through the unconscious. We have to engage with it more actively, whether through dream analysis, creative practices, or mindful self-reflection. One practical approach is journaling. You can dialogue with these inner parts of yourself. Ask your potential anima animus questions like, why do I feel drawn to this or repelled by that? What do I really want to express but hesitate to share? You might be surprised by the answers that come when you suspend judgment and just write. Another application is to reflect on your emotional triggers. The next time you feel an unexpected burst of emotion, anger, sadness, or anxiety, pause and consider whether it might be your anima or animus speaking. Mark, the father who snapped at his daughter, realized that his anger masked a deep empathy he'd never learned to handle. Likewise, Sarah, the people-pleaser, discovered that her sudden bouts of rage pointed to a valid need for boundaries. Instead of dismissing these reactions or judging them, try to see them as signals from your inner life. Therapy can also be immensely helpful. A therapist versed in Jungian or depth psychology can guide you in exploring dream imagery, recurring life themes, and hidden fantasies to unearth where your anima or animus is seeking expression. There's also the everyday practice of balancing your energies. If you're predominantly direct and action-oriented, you might focus on developing receptivity and patience. If you're generally nurturing but tend to shy away from confrontation, practicing assertiveness can invite more harmony into your life. The point is not to force a drastic personality shift, but to gradually integrate qualities that expand your sense of wholeness. One of the most powerful revelations people have during this process is realizing they have more freedom than they imagine. We often feel locked into roles or personas: tough guy, nice girl, hyper-rational thinker, caring nurturer. But once you see that you have a broader range of emotional and intellectual resources, you begin to sense new possibilities. For instance, you may realize you can be both empathetic and strong, or both logical and emotionally attuned, without sacrificing authenticity. This wholeness is at the heart of Jung's concept of individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating all parts of the psyche into a cohesive self. If it sounds daunting, remember that self-growth is a gradual, nonlinear path. We're each a work in progress. The tug-of-war inside you is a sign that two essential parts of your nature are wrestling for acknowledgement. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human, full of nuances and untapped potential. In fact, this recognition can be incredibly liberating. Once you see that your internal conflicts aren't just random chaos but signals pointing toward your deeper self, you can address them more confidently and compassionately. So let's bring it all together and summarize a few key insights. The first is that these inner opposites, the anima for men, the animus for women, carry qualities we've often been taught to suppress. Their presence explains why we sometimes act out of character or fall into repetitive relationship dynamics. The second is that these forces heavily influence not only how we relate to others, but how we express creativity and make life choices. Third, the process of integrating these aspects involves mindful awareness, reflection, and sometimes professional guidance, but it leads to greater balance, authenticity, and psychological freedom. As for how to apply this, a starting point is to observe your emotional landscape more carefully. Notice patterns in your closest relationships. Which traits in others trigger you the most? Could they be traits you haven't embraced in yourself? Another step is to engage in something like active imagination, a Jungian practice in which you let an internal figure converse with you. Ask questions and let the answers flow, whether through writing, painting, or a simple visualization. Finally, remember that any path to wholeness includes wrestling with uncomfortable truths. Embracing the anima, animus, might feel like stepping outside your comfort zone, but that's exactly where lasting growth happens. If you've stayed with me this long, consider yourself on the path towards self-discovery. The real question now is, will you take a deeper dive into exploring your inner world, or will you bury these insights and carry on as usual? Know that the more conscious you become of your hidden dimensions, the less power they have to disrupt your life. Instead, they start to nourish you, fueling your creativity, empathy, resilience, and sense of purpose. Take a moment to ask yourself, which part of me feels underrepresented, unheard, or unexpressed? And what small step can I take today to invite that hidden aspect into the light? Your soul's tug of war is not a curse. It's an invitation to become more fully yourself. Jung often reminded us that harmony doesn't come from one side vanquishing the other, but from a kind of inner dialogue that respects all voices in the psyche. When you allow that dialogue, you stop fighting against yourself and start collaborating with all that you are. In that sense, the anima or animus is not an opponent, but an ally in your journey toward wholeness. To wrap things up, let's distill these ideas into actionable guidance. First, reflect on a recent conflict, whether internal or with someone else. Ask yourself if that friction might be pointing to a neglected part of you. Second, keep a dream or emotion journal. Just 5 minutes a day can help you track recurring themes or symbolic figures that might represent your anima animus. Third, try a small experiment. If you usually stay silent to keep the peace, speak up kindly but firmly one time this week. If you typically avoid vulnerability, share a genuine feeling with someone you trust. Notice how it feels physically and emotionally to tap into these unfamiliar energies. The overall transformation you stand to gain is a renewed sense of inner peace and authenticity. Instead of being ruled by half-hidden impulses, you become an active participant in your own psychological evolution. You might notice a new clarity in your decision-making, more satisfying relationships, and a deeper capacity for self-compassion. You're no longer trapped by cultural or personal narratives telling you what you can or cannot be. When you honor the anima or animus, you open the door to a fuller, richer version of yourself. If this resonates with you, I invite you to keep the conversation going. Feel free to share your thoughts or personal experiences in the comments below. Did you ever have an aha moment that made you see your inner world differently? Are there patterns in your relationships that might be hinting at unconscious influences? Your experiences might just spark a revelation for someone else. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed, join this community dedicated to unraveling the depths of the psyche in a down-to-earth, practical way. Together, we're all learning to navigate the inner landscapes that shape our everyday lives. Thanks for taking this deep dive into Jung's concept of the anima and animus. By recognizing these internal figures and integrating the qualities they represent, you take a vital step toward becoming a more balanced, self-aware individual. The real work starts now as you go back into your daily life armed with fresh insights. Keep an open mind, observe your emotional patterns, and don't shy away from the self-discovery process. Because in the end, the tug of war in your soul isn't something to eliminate. It's something to understand and harness so you can live in greater harmony with yourself and the world around you. Whichever title you choose, remember that what truly counts is the conversation you start within yourself and with others. Stay curious, stay reflective, and stay open to the unfolding mystery of who you really are.